I held it in my hands while he told the story. He had found it in a fallen bunker, a book for notes with all the pages blank. He took it to keep for a sketchbook and diary. He learned years later when he showed the book to an old bookbinder who paled and stepped back a long step and told him what he held, what he had laid the days of his life in. "It's bound," the binder said, "in human skin." I stood turning it over in my hands, turning it in my head. Human skin. What child did the skin fit? What man, what woman, dragged still full of its flesh from what dream? Who took it off the meat? Some other one who stayed alive by knowing how to do this. I stared at the changing book, and a horror grew. I stared, and a horror grew, which is, how beautiful it was, until I knew.
Hey guys, so for this week's Get Lit Friday video, we're going to be analyzing the poem titled The Book by Miller Williams. So let's get started. So the first thing we'll be analyzing is the title, and the title of the poem is The Book. Without reading it, the title doesn't really reveal much other than that the poem is about a book. The use of the word "the" possibly signifies that the book is significant for some reason unknown to the reader. Next is the speaker. Not much is really known about the speaker, whose role in the poem is rather insignificant compared to the actual book itself. We can also, based on the reaction to his discovering that he is a fairly normal individual, he's relatively stable. Next, we'll be analyzing the figurative language in the poem. So the skin on the book represents a hidden evil. However, skin itself is not a hidden evil. The skin on the book represents this hidden evil because the speaker doesn't know how bad it can get until he experiences it himself. This is also a case of irony because skin usually keeps a human together. However, in this poem, the human had to be torn apart and unbound to make the titular book. However, the skin is holding something together, just not what the reader or the speaker would expect. Furthermore, the speaker dedicated his whole life to this book, thus binding himself with someone else's skin rather than his own. Next, we are going to analyze the attitude or the tone of the poem. For the first two stanzas, the tone is somewhat calm and reminiscent. The narrator seems to be reflecting back on when he initially received the book, and he states that he had kept it to use as a sketchbook and a diary, indicating that he had intended to use it, but he didn't come to think that the book would be bound in human skin. However, most books are not bound in human skin, thus it is reasonable that the speaker had not thought of this. However, the tone dramatically shifts in the third stanza, as evidenced by the bookbinder who, quote, paled and stepped back a long step, end quote, at realizing what the book was bound in. This shock and horror is evident throughout the remainder of the poem. For example, in the last stanza, the speaker tells us that he, quote, stared at the changing book and a horror grew, end quote, indicating that he was not only extremely disturbed by the book, but also possibly confused. The last line tells us that the narrator thought the book was beautiful until, quote, I knew, end quote, meaning he thought it was harmless until he knew the truth. Next, we will talk about the shift, or the shifts. The obvious shift occurs when the narrator learns that the diary he holds in his hand is bound with human skin, which happens in the third stanza. He is obviously and quite understandably extremely disturbed by this newfound knowledge, as any normal, stable human would be. After reading the poem, going back and looking at the title is rather ironic. Such a simple title may have led the reader to believe that the poem is rather innocent in nature. However, after reading the poem, the readers get the sense that that innocent thought they had was completely wrong, and that the poem's title needs to be viewed in a much darker light. The horror associated with the book is now ingrained into not only the speaker's mind, but also the reader's mind. Lastly, the theme of the poem. The poem serves to, in a sense, give us this kind of reality check as readers and as people, at how ignorant we may be to many of the horrifying acts that could be happening right under our noses. Similarly, with Invisible Man, the students in the college are oblivious to the horrible things such as the true blood with the incest that is happening in the outside world because they are sheltered in this college, this like Garden of Eden type utopia. In the real world, examples include the items and clothes we use or wear could be products of child labor. Slave labor is possibly used to produce the chocolate and the coffee we love. Chickens we consume are products of artificial growth and inhumane living conditions. So this poem serves to kind of as a wake-up call to like, hey, there are horrible things happening in the world and we are oblivious to it.